let's go ahead and go right into it. First of all, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming in today and give us an opportunity for us all to have a nice conversation and figure out some directions we're going and things we're hoping to do, and talk about some of the places we're at now with our financing, our budget. With that being said, do you want to go ahead and start off there, Frank, with budget?
Sure, I can. Item number 2 is the 2018 budget online. I included that in here just so that I can let everybody know that the 2018 budget book has been put together. Some hard copies were created, but they've all been put online and are available on the county website.
Anybody have any questions for him? Okay, Frank, go ahead and go on to number 3.
The next item was, if you had the handout for the December financials, I don't want to go through them page by page. I'll let everybody look at them at their leisure. What I do want to address are pages 10 and 11. Those are the last 2 pages. And the reason for that is because that talks about the forecast for cash flow and ending fund cash balances. A forecast that was done back on October 16th, 2017, when we were having our briefings and discussions around cash reserves, contingency cash, and ending fund cash balances. At that point in time, it was looking like we were not going to be able to acquire a 15% cash reserve on our expenditures until about 2022, which are the 2 green, the green dot. So what the $1,927,000 is what a 15% cash balance added to our projected ending fund balance of $3,177,000. So that would be almost $5 million. We wouldn't acquire that until somewhere around 2022. Given the parameters and the constraints that we have around this forecast, which is to say that revenues are moving at 2.1% a year increase, and expenditures are moving at 3.9% on a budgeted basis and 4.3% on an actual basis. So with those lines not, what I mean by lines, the projections being at least almost 2% apart, revenues will never catch up to expenditures unless we do some dramatic changes, which is what we did in 2018. The next page then looks at what that occurred at the end of December. So after the budget cuts and the budget adjustments, we were able to do some revenue increases above what we had projected in the October projections. And we did some additional budget cuts, not additional, but we did budget cuts to get to the ending fund balance in 2017. What that did for us is it brought the ending fund balance not from $3,177,000 where we were projecting, but our actual ending fund balance was $4,103,000 at the end of December. What that offered us the ability to do as a projection is to reduce our time expectation for getting to a 15% reserve from 2022 down to 2020. And if we can continue doing the kinds of budgetary controls that reduce the amount of expenditures growths, then we can continue to improve on that and put additional contingency reserves aside as well. So those were the 2 major things that I wanted to show in this, which was our cash ending fund balance was about $1 million more than what we projected for the end of the year 2017. And what that did was bring our time period to get to a 15% cash reserve from 2022 down to somewhere around 2020.
So even though we've had improvements on our ending fund balance, are we still at risk this year of coming up short?
Well, the 4,000,001, if I recall, brings us almost exactly to where we ended up last year, which was just a little over $4 million. So we are still at risk, getting into mid-March, of not having enough cash on hand to carry us through the end of March.
Questions?
I have a question. Do you take in, we have to take into consideration that we had the additional cash at the end of December because there was no 13th month.
Correct.
So,
That's predominantly what is driving this. Just, that's to say, don't expect that next year.
that's exactly right.
Yeah, because not having 13th month again doesn't improve it again. This is the only time that we can garner that benefit.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Frank. Let's go ahead and move on to the sick leave policy.
As most of you may be aware, Washington State has implemented a new supplemental sick leave policy for individuals that are not working full-time, may be seasonal, may be something less than a full FTE, where they would accrue 1 hour of sick leave for every 40 hours worked, which is below our standard sick leave allowance, but most of these seasonal workers or part-time workers were not accruing any sick leave on our books. So as a result of the legislation that was passed, we now are accruing sick leave for each of these individuals. The handout identifies how that policy was put together and what it represents. So basically, it's to say that those individuals that have not been receiving any sick leave are entitled to 1 hour of sick leave for every 40 hours worked. At the end of the year, there would have been 52 weeks. In theory, they could have accrued 52 hours if not taking any sick leave in that year. Carryover is only allowed for 40 hours, so they would lose the difference of the 12 hours at the end of the year, but they can carry 40 hours over. For successive years, they can still only carry 40 hours over into the following year. If there are any questions, give me a call or give HR a call. We've started this as of 1st of January, and we'll be sending out following emails to those individuals that are affected.
Do you have any idea what this is going to look like on affecting our budgets?
It's sick time, they cannot cash it out. So no practical dollar impact. It's just what it would take us to cover time off for these individuals, and that's very hard to estimate.
Anybody have any questions on the new sick leave policy or how it came to be?
Frank, how many employees does that affect?
15, I think it was. And that was counting the seasonals that were laid off to some degree last year, so something less than 50. Next year, we have another one coming through, which is a minimum wage type of implementation. So we have this coming in phases. But this year's mandate was for sick leave accruals.
Is Munis factoring or calculating all this, or are we having to kind of hand do it for a bit?
It's Munis that's calculating.
Okay, thanks.
There was a payroll accrual that was incorporated into Munis that accounted for this separate and above from our current sick leave accruals.
All right, thanks.
I wanted to clarify for everybody in the audience and stuff, that the commission had discussed on how we're going to do this specific meeting at this time, and we're going to try and stay within department heads and elected officials at this point. So that's where the questions will be given opportunity to be answered. So with that being said, is there anybody else has any other questions on the sick leave? Okay. So next up is revenue brainstorming.
So what I did is I put a PowerPoint presentation together in regards to the revenue brainstorming and the strategic plan, so I combined those two. And what I wanted to present is, first off, here's our existing current Mason County mission. I'm sure everybody has read it at least a couple of times. And here are the county goals as they exist currently. So the question was, whoops, sorry. So the question was, I can't get to the third page. I apologize. Hold on. There we go. Sorry about that. So the question is, what is a strategic plan?
Actually, the question was revenue brainstorming first.
Well, they're combined in here. Because part of the strategic plan incorporates revenue and expenditure analysis. So what is the strategic plan? If you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. That's an excellent Benjamin Franklin proverb. Basically what it is it looks at where are we now and attempts to put together a plan of where do we want to go and what do we want to be. In real simplest terms, that's basically what it is. Using your visions, missions, and goals, you define a strategy and a formulation to figure out how you want to get to where you want to go, and then you have a strategy to implement those strategies and formulations to get to a strategic plan. What that calls for is putting together a program to plan on how to plan for a strategic plan. The development of a strategic plan is a complex undertaking. Like any complex project, advanced planning will offer the county a first foothold to success. We will address some fundamental elements that the strategic planning team will find useful. One is to establish who the planning team is. Identify a facilitator, incorporate the electeds, the department heads, incorporate external shareholders as EDC or Realtors Association, and solicit the input from citizens. Once you've defined the team, then you need to define the process. By an interactive process establishing what are called SMART objectives, and there are a dozen different programs to put a strategic plan together, but SMART objectives would be very specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound objectives. Then it would be the goal of the planning team to define the mission, the vision, the goals, and the guiding principles for the process. That would include public safety, justice, health, human services, economic vitality, accessible and affordable housing, a healthy environment, and an efficient, accountable regional government. Those are only some of the highlighted regions that the strategic plan can look at. So the components of a strategic plan are to develop a current and a historical context. What are the issues, problems faced, and why does it matter? The strategic plan development process, which is to say, how was the plan developed, or how will the plan be developed? Identifying a mission statement, which is what is it that we do, who are we? Identify a vision with desired outcomes. What are we trying to achieve with the strategic plan? Using goals, priorities, and equity alignments, which is how the plan will improve Mason County. Measure success. A strategic plan is very high level, but without being able to measure the success of your stated goals and strategies, it's very difficult to define the success of the plan itself. strategies that achieve outcomes, what are we planning to do to achieve the vision, implementation and action plans, how are we going to get it done, and then another important aspect of it is reviewing it on a periodic basis and making adjustments to the plan because of things that didn't work as you had planned, or external or internal modifications or changes that might affect the implementation of the plan. So for successful strategic planning, one of the first steps is to secure a consensus regarding the need for a strategic plan. That would mean that as part of this meeting or as part of a future meeting, the electeds and the department heads would concur on the county engaging on a program to develop a strategic plan. And then with that, you would select a facilitator, implement a design team, and incorporate community stakeholders. Go back and assess the current condition of the county, determine the duration of the plan. Is it a 5-year plan? Is it a 10-year plan? Is it a 20-year plan? Strategic plans can have a short-term component, 5 years of a 10-year plan. How does the county want to set up a strategic plan and develop those parameters? Determine the strategic planning process, establish a method of qualifying success, determine frequency of plan review and update, implement the plan, and again, review the plan's success. So we kind of stepped towards that a little bit last year. Last year we had a brainstorming session, the results of which identified priorities for 2017. Land use and development regulations, which we are pretty much done with. Implementing a capital facility plan, again, we have pretty much completed those items. We looked at a new jail facility. That kind of was put on the back burner mid last year and will be coming back forward again. Looking at a jail facility is not a couple month or even a 1-year program. It's a multi-year strategy that incorporates many pieces. So that'll be in process over a long period of time. Evaluate the transition to a biennial budget. Again, we started that last year. I'd say we were not all that successful in getting there, but hopefully we can continue that process and improve on putting together a biennial budget again, if the electeds and the department heads want that to proceed. We had reviewed a public benefits rating system, which is still in progress. County policy implementing to provide services equitably throughout the county. That's also an ongoing process with the help of the audit committee. There are a number of policies and procedures that we're putting together to kind of tie the how do we get things done and why are we doing what we're doing into a policy and procedure program. Continued quarterly meetings with the county elected officials and directors. Again, it's still in progress. Host a conversation with developers to gain a better understanding of the opportunities and areas of improvement in Mason County. That has yet to be done. And continue evaluation of and define a Belfair sewer plan. And that is also continuing to move forward. So a 2018 brainstorming session would potentially establish a citizens committee to advise the board on budget priorities, efficiencies with improvements to service delivery, perform an overall assessment of county services and customer satisfaction, develop actions to be taken with regard to revenues, define opportunities to better manage expenditures and expenditure growth. In order to do that, how would you do that? By examining revenue options and expenditure necessity. Examine the effect of funded, unfunded, and underfunded mandates on the county. Define financial drivers of revenues and expenditures and establish recommendations for a sustainable budget. One of the handouts that I had put forward was the yellow document. This was a document that was recently put together by U.S. County. It identified underfunded, and what I added to it was the funding. That was looking at only the pieces that were, the dollar components that were missing. But I think it's also important to understand what are those mandates that are funded within our budget. So I would envision a citizens committee to advise the commissioners would use a tool like this to understand the intricacies of what are funded, unfunded, and underfunded mandates for Mason County. So, again, summarize and to offer out an opportunity for questions. We're talking about whether or not to develop a strategic plan. We're talking about whether or not to incorporate a citizens committee on revenue and expenditure budget options that looks at dedicated programmatic federal, state, and regional grant revenue, because that's the other component. We did look at that in 2018, in 2017 for the 2018 budget, because it didn't make sense to reduce budgets where we had either partial or 100% grant funding. And I'm thinking maybe, well, specifically was child support enforcement. We had a program for child support enforcement. If we cut that budget, all we would do is turn back money from the grantor. So look at what programs we currently have that are funded through grants. Then look at what are the funded, unfunded, and underfunded mandates within the county, and how does that affect the overall county budget and its expenditures. The committee would establish recommendations for a sustainable county budget within the parameters of a defined strategic plan. Go back to 2017 brainstorming sessions and complete the unfinished business, and then propose a 2018 brainstorming session. So next steps would be to establish if there's a desire to develop a strategic plan, and establish if there's a desire, a citizens committee to review revenues and expenditures, review the success of the 2017 brainstorming sessions, and to set out a 2018 brainstorming session. And that's all I have.
Now, with that being said, on the next steps, and what was just presented to you, what are your thoughts? Anybody have any thoughts on what we've just discussed?
I guess the question that seems to beg itself is, what are we strategically planning for?
Sustainable budgets.
For myself, that would be one of my main concerns, is trying to make sure that we can financially do whatever we're going to continue to try to do.
Define priorities of government.
And that's the request from the sheriff. That's a lot harder, we've been talking about this commission, it's a lot harder to do when you have elected officials that actually have their own agendas about what they're going to do. So we have to find a way to incorporate all that, and that's going to be a lot harder. We've asked that Frank go out and look at other counties and find it a little hard to find ones that have a true plan that does all that.
Not all of the counties have a strategic plan of any kind. About 50% of those that do, their plan is a few pages long, and it basically says we're government and we're here for the people and all of that nice sounding governmental stuff. But there are a few out there, King County, Pierce, I think there was Howard's County, had a very involved, detailed strategic planning process that gets into understanding how to manage the dollars that the county gets, and drives or allows the commission and the electeds to drive forward, understanding what their budgets may look like in the future.
Would you like to see copies of that? Would you like to have them sent out to you?
I would think that it would make sense to look at something that Cowlitz County is doing versus a Pierce or a King or council forms of
Pierce or King,
government.
they have a manual this thick on
Right.
how to do strategic planning, and their plan is that thick.
And
So, yeah, agreed.
Look at something that's more
Yeah.
relevant to Mason County in size and shape and form versus, you know, but it would be interesting to see theirs. and any
I
other
can
samples
forward that
might
to-
be out there.
To all of the electeds.
And my apologies in the back, I did not, I catch that we had a change of leadership, I forgot about that. Please.
You were talking about the grant-funded programs,
Correct.
and because I would also add grant-funded and partnership-funded programs, because we have agency partnerships that aren't grant-funded to not negate those partnerships.
Yeah.
So we agree.
Such as WSU.
Not to name one thing specific.
So we'll send out to everybody a couple of the examples, including Cowlitz. And then we'll decide if that's the direction we want to go after that. What about the Citizens Committee? Any ideas on how that should be established? Go ahead.
Sorry, it seems like I have a lot to say today. I just saw some emails flying around from other treasurers, this establishing a citizens committee seems to be a hot topic in a lot of counties in regards to budget. And there were a couple of counties out there that had some, I think, already developed. Again, it would be worth going out and looking to see kind of what they've done already.
Kitsap did one back in, I think it was '09.
There was somebody more recent.
And then there are a couple of more recent ones.
Yeah.
We can incorporate that into this is how other counties are doing it.
So it would be nice to have those samples or to have those to look at and review, and get an idea of where you would want to go, if that works for you, or what, you know.
I'd also like to see what benefit they felt they gained from having that citizens council also.
That's a great question.
Frank, is this just, if the citizens committee comes in, is this just gonna be a place for them as a sounding board to toss their ideas out? Because we've had this before, and the citizens committee met for 6 months, and then nothing became of what they recommended, and they were very disenchanted with the process that they went through once.
And that was an advisory committee, if I can, which is to advise the board in the specifics of what it was assigned to review. I would agree that without giving away the decision-making process of the board, but in somehow empowering those that are on that committee, a voice in the conversation around where does our recommendations go. But again, that would have to be up to the commission.
I would think an extra set of eyes more than anything else. They're not going to be able to come in and tell us. A great example is that committee you're talking about. If it was just that simple, then we would just take all this money and just move it over to the sheriff's department at that time, because that's what they were requesting, but we had all these other departments we had to keep going too. So it's not just as simple as having some people tell us what to do. As a commission, we have to do our job as well.
I guess, shy of saying the sheriff's office, that committee was asked for by the commission and selected by the commission, had nothing to do with me. And so
I didn't say
it went
that.
back to go to the sheriff's office. They were asked to do something by the board, and their feedback at the end of that was that they didn't feel that anything had been listened to. So that's why I'm wondering if they're gonna have any stake in being able to make these decisions, or if it's a sounding board to give information back. Recommendations, I should say. Okay.
Commissioners, want to speak on that?
I don't know whether there'd be any authority. I mean, it would mean that those that have those authorities would want to cede them to a group of citizens.
So it'd be an advisory back to you.
It would have to be, I would think.
Okay.
And I think, sorry if I could just piggyback on that. I think a lot of it depends on how the work is scoped and who the participants are. And that kind of speaks to Lisa's point about looking at some of the other models that are out there and what's been successful and what hasn't been. I don't think we're in a position where we need to recreate the wheel for some of these things. And, I think if we look at this, and I'm not making any revenue recommendations, but if revenue recommendations would come out of a committee like that, I think ultimately it would fall to the commission to decide what and how and when and all that, but it's also, I think it's an educational opportunity for the community to bring additional people from the community into the process, understand the complexities of the budgets that we have to deal with, an opportunity for all of your offices to, have some of those things looked at as well. So I think ultimately it comes down to how we scope the work and, determine ultimately what the outcomes are.
Ours to your honor, and then Jerry, you got it?
Yes, on behalf of the Superior Court, first of all, I'm the only elected official for the Superior Court that's able to be here today, and I have a limitation to be back on the docket shortly. The other two are on the bench. And so the other two judges would also want to weigh in on this. There is a limitation as to where the judiciary can go with regard to voicing any opinion with regard to countywide budgets. We are focused purely upon the judiciary. So I'm not so certain how we fit into any kind of strategic planning. However, to the extent it affects the judiciary, we would be very interested.
Jerry?
I'd like to kind of build on what Commissioner Schutte just said as far as having a very detailed scope when they go into it, the timetable. So the expectations for those folks that would be part of this, they know what they're getting into, and then thoroughly vetting these individuals. So you've got somebody that's got the wherewithal to put the time into it and comprehend the task that they're undertaking.
I can tell you, one of the things I would hope that we would end up seeing, in working with my fellow commissioners, one of the things that comes up is one of them will come up with an idea, or they see something that I may not have seen. Once it gets noticed and gets brought to my attention, then I end up looking much farther and can figure it out better. I'm hoping whatever we put together is a group of people that actually understand budget, can go deeper into the budget and see the things that may benefit us, or find some of the traps we may be falling into, to give recommendation or at least conversation to, so that we may have a better conversation as a commission. But that, again, is just a hope. In order to pull that off, we're gonna have to find some pretty talented people who are willing to put in time, because anybody that knows our budgets, it's not 3 pages thick. You're gonna have to get pretty deep.
And if I may add, a critical component of this is timing. If we're hoping to get some input into this, from this, into the 2019 budget preparation, that process needs to be at least 80-90% complete by the time we get to the call for budget, or at least once we get into the budget cycle. A large portion of this process should be completed.
The other question I would have is on the priorities of government. Let's maybe foreseen citizens committee be making recommendations or presenting ideas for priorities of government. We did this a number of years ago and went out all over the county, and the citizens gave their input from different strategic meetings that were attended. And then they were supposed to have gone into a priorities of government that we were all going to guide ourselves towards. Is that committee also going to take a look at some things that they think as citizens are important for Mason County as a whole, and to give us some focus and direction as a priority of government, so that we can work towards the strategic planning for those goals?
I'm not sure how you can get budgetary
That would-
recommendations without doing that.
Well, that's what I'm saying, it hasn't been done before, that's.
Well, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure how, as a commissioner, I'm not sure how that would come out until you start the process, see what you have, and they start working together. I would assume they're gonna have to, being citizens of the community, they're gonna have their ideas and the things they want. I don't think you can separate the two. It's just finding a way for them to look at the numbers and come up with their best recommendations. But again, in my opinion, it's just advisory. And hopefully we're smart enough to take advice when we hear it, if it seems like a winner, but they're not gonna know it all, neither will we. What else do you think about that and the Citizens Committee? Any other?
I guess I just wanted to weigh in a bit. If you looked at what we looked at the beginning of this meeting, where we're needing to close the gap between expenditure growth and revenue growth. It seems to me that if you're talking about sustainable budgeting, I think the two are kind of separated. I disagree that there's a priority government that feeds into sustainable budgeting. I think there's two questions, and one is, how do we keep that gap? How's that gap get closed? Which is a function of looking at where the expenditure increases are coming from. And, we are seeing, is there sustainability in our revenue increases that could be counted on? And if we've seen the model of 3.5% over the years, is that something we can continually bank on? And then how do you bring the expenditure increase down to 3.5% on a sustainable basis? And if that's reducing cost increases, how does that feed into determining what the priorities of government are? Because all those functions of this county are absolutely mandated and necessary. So how do you prioritize one over the other one? This is kind of what I keep struggling with when I've heard over and over again that we should be doing priorities in government, because all of these functions are mandated in priorities based on the Constitution, basically. So I think that a citizens committee could be tremendously helpful on looking at historically and then into the nearest future, where are our expenditure growths coming from, and can they be squelched or reduced? Is it a function of cell phone policies, ER&R policies, wage and medical benefit policies, those types of things?
Can't argue with that. And I think that's all wrapped up in it. And I hope we do actually put together a group that can see all that. I know that we'll have several that I've seen come to our meetings that have really gotten deep into our budgets, that will have some knowledge of what we can pull together enough that will actually have a bigger impact and look at things with different eyes.
And I'd be very interested to hear how people think of priorities of government here. Given what my belief that everything we do here is a priority. Is there any, I've heard people disagree with that, but I haven't heard an example of what is the priority and who should step back because something else is a bigger priority. And I'd love to hear some conversation around that among this group, because you're all head of and elected to provide those those functions.
And actually, I think that's one of the things we're hoping for as a commission. You haven't probably noticed yet, but instead of quarterly, we're hoping to start to have these meetings on a bi-monthly with the hope that we all start, this is pretty uncomfortable right now, and we all know that, but hopefully after we get in the room with each other long enough and we start to express our opinions long enough and work together long enough, that we'll loosen up enough, we'll have some great benefit from it. But you're not going to do it until we start doing what we're doing now. And we'll get down to that at the end. I'd like to have your opinions on what you think about what we're trying to do on a bi-monthly. But so for now, is there anybody that has any heartburn with the idea that we're looking to put together a citizens group? Good. So I think then, as a commission, we know that that's one area to move forward. What about coming together in the future to review the success in areas of 2017 and look at things that still need to be completed? We'll probably wrap that up at the same time as an emphasis on what we should be doing in 2018 for a future meeting. Anybody have any opinions on that at all, either negative or positive?
I would just insert that, is there a desire to develop a strategic plan? There probably is. But I don't know that we can bite off more than we can chew in trying to get this all compacted into 2018 and do a strategic plan and a citizens committee. And, maybe the focus right now needs to be on our budget process and how we get that into a nice flow or better process, and then work towards, maybe if that were resolved in 2018 or more towards the final end of it at the end of 2018, then we could look at a strategic plan in 2019. But I'm kind of thinking you want to take steps, not baby steps, but steps, but not out of a full run.
Yes, I appreciate those comments, Lisa. I think, strategic plan take quite a while to put together and I think given maybe some of the electoral changes and things that are probably forthcoming, we don't want to get too far down the road, but we want to make progress and, as new people come on board and share some ideas and thoughts and that kind of thing. So I think probably the priority for me would be get the Citizens Committee up and running, take a look at the present budget situation, and then as that work gets underway, enter the process of the strategic plan over a longer period of time.
And if we continue to have these meetings the way we're talking, that might be a great avenue to start to exercise some of those differences, as long as we keep track of everything that we are discussing and the ideas that we may have for the future. It'll help us when it comes time to finally set down for that strategic plan. Any other ideas or comments on that?
So I think it's important because we need to start planning early if in fact something comes back that we need a levy lift or we're gonna try again to increase or sales tax. Is that part of this committee or is this
That
something
would be
that's
my
gonna run in
recommendation, yes.
conjunction with this committee? I mean, because you need to start that ball rolling down.
You're here.
I think the brainstorming aspect from every one of you, that's what we're hoping will come out of this. Dave?
My comment would be that a strategic plan gives you the ability to align your focus for your spending. It aligns what you're going to do with your capital facilities program. It takes the county out of the mode of being reactive to things and proactive. It puts us into a place where we get ahead of the curve. And I don't think you can put that off into the distant future and expect your budgets to align with your goals.
Anybody have any comments on that statement? That is a pretty profound statement. It's a complete different direction than what's been being talked about right now. See, I myself, again, I think personally we do need to continue moving with the strategic plan, but maybe not put it up front, because I will agree. I think the budget issue we're facing right now and learn how we work with each other on it is probably going to be the most important, but I'd love to see us continue to work on a strategic plan and eventually here having a real one in place, but it may not be that we have all of our work sessions become that in the near term.
I agree with probably almost everything you said back there, because the whole idea, we've been asking for this for 11 years. But you still have to decide what those things are that are important to county government so that you can move towards those, as he was just saying. So we know what it is and where we're moving. Before you start moving there, it would be a good idea to have, whatever term you want to use, your goals, objectives, or your priorities of what we want to move to and focus towards. And I value his opinions. I think he's correct on that. And it's something we have not done that we need to do for years. So I would agree with we need to move forward. But I think you have to establish, if you want to go to the Super Bowl, you got to say, I want to go to the Super Bowl. You can't say, I want to win the first, preseason game. You have to look where you want to go, and you have to know what those things are that you want to do before you can get there. So if that's what the Citizens Committee is going to do, or however that's going to work, I'm for that. But you got to know where you're going if you know how you're going to get there.
I'm not sure that that's what the Citizens Committee will do, though. Or you guys think it's something different?
Well, I was kind of confused on what you would want the Citizens Committee for. What are they advising you on? Just the budget directly or the overall strategic plan for the county? It's one thing here and one thing.
So I think part of the confusion is, I see them as two separate processes. I think the Citizens Committee on the budget is limited in scope and duration. There are other counties that have sort of an ongoing Citizens Committee. I'm not sure that's a route we want to go down long term, but I look at it as limited in scope and duration to focus on our current fiscal situation and then putting together recommendations on where we should be looking. That's part of where this Lewis County document comes into play, is taking a look at all the budget constraints that we're under currently. How do we fund things going forward? Because I think a lot of our work is driven by mandates, whether they're funded or unfunded. I heard that message pretty loud and clear all last fall. So I think the budget committee should be focused on the budget that we currently have, and then ultimately make recommendations on areas where we should, maybe where we could be looking for more strategic cuts, or where we need to be putting more resources. And then ultimately, if they feel that there's a need, there's a revenue solution that they feel comfortable bringing forward based on the details of the budget. As far as the strategic planning is concerned, I see that as a wider scope and a much more in-depth process that charts that course. But, we kind of have to address the elephant in the room, and that's the overarching goal here is keep the lights on, keep things moving in county government, and so that we don't continue to face the budget shortfalls that we have. And so I think this is a multi-step process that hopefully changes the way we've governed and improves that process.
Sorry, Undersheriff. Department heads, elected officials. Anything further on that?
Only to say this, if we keep doing our budget on a year-to-year basis, then the only thing we're going to be thinking of is next year. If we move it to biennial, then the only thing we're going to be thinking of is the next 2 years. There are many issues on which, if we make some kind of investment now, we can see a return in the budget 5 or 6 years down the road that we will never take advantage of if we don't do something like this. That's where I see the advantage of something along these lines, is figuring out where those long-term investments could come from. Not just today's revenue versus expenditure versus headache mode that we're constantly locked into. There are a lot of things out there where if we started making the fix now, it wouldn't get fixed for 5 or 6 years, but it could get fixed eventually. And I'd kind of like to know what those are. I think you need a strategic plan to do something like that.
I would agree with you, that's exactly what I'm trying to say.
So how do you think we would go about that? Dave, do you have an idea of the best way you think that we should go about that? Oh, sorry. We're gonna have this conversation again, and all the people that are underneath the elected officials will have an opportunity to come back to them. We've actually talked about allowing it more open for further meeting, but currently it's just elected officials and directors. Any idea on what do you think we should do to look at that, or we can just bring that up at the next meeting and see if we can start to put together some type of strategy on how we would take a bite out of that elephant? I do think it's important that we start the process somewhere. I do. I honestly do believe, though, we still have to attack how we're going to handle our own budget to a certain point, because a great example is how the issues we had this last year on, we don't want to put together a proposal within the structure that we needed as commissioners to work with it. I think there's a simple solution to it, but it's how do we get there? Several years ago, we had a solution that actually worked, that took care of both the issues. But there were some individuals that didn't like the process. It was the idea of coming up with the A and A+. A was fit the parameters of what people were asking for. A+ was fitting the parameters of what you wanted or what you thought. At least by having those two together, we had an idea of what it would look like without it. But it still allowed for the elected officials to put together a budget that fully funded what they think should occur in their department. And I'm not saying to do that, I'm just saying that was before us a few years ago. Maybe we should reconsider something like that again, so that we have an opportunity to get both of our needs fulfilled when it comes to that budget process. And I'm not asking for any of that today, just bringing that out there. But maybe so for the next meeting, maybe we can come up with some ideas on how a strategic plan creation, what that would look like. And maybe have some ideas on how that budget process could fulfill both needs, because we're going to be faced with the same thing this next year. There's this many dollars to work with, and there's needs on this side. Somehow we have to find something between.
What I wanted to suggest is that what it's sounding like is to bring this forward again at the next meeting. If we want to have impact in 2019's budget, specifically as it relates to potential new revenue streams and things of that nature, that needs to happen much sooner than 2 months from now.
And I think that's why the strategic plan people and the citizens committee have to be
Two separate.
two separate
Yeah,
things.
I do too. Go ahead.
I think, one of the, to borrow a popular analogy that's been used here a couple of times already, where we want to go and how do we get there as a county, I think we're still trying to figure out what car we take. The budget is the vehicle that ultimately gets us to our destination and helps us achieve, the goals and meet the objectives of our, whatever we set forward here, based, for now, what's up on the wall over there, the mission statement that Frank showed earlier. So I think we have to go through an idea of what we want that vehicle to look like to get us to where we need to be. And where we need to be is some sort of fiscal or financial sustainability. And, and that's where I really see the Citizens Budget Committee come in, is to help us address those issues and tell us, okay, here is the vehicle, the methodology that you're going to use to get to the destination, which is to provide services X, Y, and Z to the people of Mason County. And here is the level of funding that you can expect currently. Here's where we need to be, and here, and so kind of look at all those parameters. And so I think that's we've said it a couple of times, but maybe that's why I think the two are separate, but both have very important, could lead to very important outcomes for the county.
Well, and this is just my understanding of the situation, is that unless you can identify new revenue sources, we're pretty much stuck in our little box here. So I really can't say, I'm not functioning as well as I'd like to. I can tell you where I want to be, but it's going to cost you more money. So until we find revenue sources, we really can't move. We're like just stuck right here.
And that's why I think it's important to bring members of the community into the process. There's an education piece so that they understand sort of the realities of the budget that we currently have and have an understanding about what maybe the individual offices need, and better define that for the community, so that if there are revenue options that would emerge from a Citizens Budget Committee, there's a better understanding of the community as to what and how and why.
Right, but I think each of us can identify the needs of our office
Sure.
without somebody pointing it out to us.
Yeah, go ahead.
So maybe put another way.
We understand.
Yeah.
We are looking to bring people into the conversation a little bit more fully than we did last year when we had a ballot measure that would have addressed
Okay.
some of those needs.
And I don't think it'd be proper for anybody to be telling, what you need or don't need. You can't always get what you want or ask for, but you still are gonna need to be able to say what you need and don't need at your department. Sorry.
Well, that, but also any revenue generation, any amount of revenue that we have legal authority to go ask the voters for will be limited based on what the budget requests were. We're never gonna be able to fill the budget request needs. So there is the question also of how do you divide, should it be successful at the ballot, how do you divide that money out? And that's the issue of the citizens not, really understanding where's this money gonna go. And so maybe that's the role of the Citizens Committee too. If there was a recommendation that you go,
Establishing priorities.
that you go to go after this particular authorized revenue source, and this is how, and it would generate X amount of dollars, and this is where it would go.
Especially, I think, in light of what we had gone through last year with reductions and, now that we're seeing this year a change in level of services. We look at, the Lewis County doc, all these things I think need to be articulated to the community, and this is another avenue to do that.
And maybe now's the time to share with you something that, I know I've had conversations with Frank, and he's looking into it. The commission has not made decisions on any of this, but it's something that we are having conversations on, and that is looking to do a shift, basically, that lowers one and adds to the other. So lowers in the road fund, adds to the other's conversation we're having, but it's not as easy up to this point to be able to put something on the ballot. they're looking to see what that would even look like to do. But that is one of the things that's being looked at, but bear in mind, that's not gonna fix everything, not by a long shot. What that's gonna do is give a shot in the arm and help protect parts, strengthen a little more coming in, but I don't think it would fix the issues we're facing with. Any other ideas, or?
I was going to make mention that strategic planning, it's about 6-7 years ago, and we got together and probably all of our offices do that. It's like, where do we want to be in 2020? And every now and then get that out and just see what direction you're going. And it is amazing. Yeah, Melody was right. We have these great ideas and we know where we want to go. We know we can't afford everything this year, so recording is next year, and the next year is likely to be, et cetera, and that's what we have to do here. But between the legislature and our budget, a lot of those have gone by the wayside. But I think if we brought those forward, because you don't know my plan, it might not correlate with yours with the strategic planning, so I do hope that you bring in the citizens to be involved in that too.
Yeah, and I mean, I would envision a scenario, again, no work has been scoped yet, but I would envision a scenario in which each elected office and department had an opportunity to meet with the citizens group to, coordinate with Frank and have an opportunity to explain your budget, why, maybe a third rail thing here, but maybe why you made some of the decisions for the 2018 budget that you did, and those kinds of things, because I think it helps shed some light on where we are and, what maybe the future looks like without some kind of change. And so, this isn't going to be, I see it being a commission-driven project, but it's not an exclusive, process. I mean, it's, your budgets all factor into the bigger picture, and so those conversations should absolutely happen with any citizens group, in my opinion.
I think it'd be a mistake if it didn't, because we as a commission can't explain to them that you ended up doing 2 half-time people to be able to make this one part function, or you decided not to hire until a certain point in order to make this function, or you decided to leave in your budget only a small amount of 2 line items because later on you're going to change it at the end. I can say some of these things, but the truth of the matter is, probably should be telling these people so they have the same kind of knowledge that we've picked up. And again, many eyes, many hands, many minds, we might be able to all grasp it a little bit better, and they may be able to ask us some questions that make us grasp it that much better.
I would say too, there probably has to be, and I haven't thought through this completely, so, keep that in mind, but there has to be some labor component to the process as well, a labor involvement, from that side. I think it would be helpful for folks to understand how much of our budget is collective bargaining driven, and understanding those costs, and I think there would be an opportunity to include some of that in the conversation as well, and sort of just show how much of our budget is directed at those kinds of costs as well.
Anything further on? Yes.
So my concern is this definitely needs to be a board-driven process with all of our input and help. But, and I guess you would look to Frank to drive that at this point. Is he going to be able to add that to everything else he has on his plate and be efficient in getting this process driven
When we hire a
forward?
new budget manager, yes.
See, that's just it,
Yeah. And we're, actually, we got approval today.
I'm
to go ahead.
concerned
Yeah.
that this will,
You're concerned because you're intelligent, treasurer. There's right to be concerned.
But I think that speaks for all of us, that I will do this when I can do this, but I probably can't ever do this because I'm never going to have the money. And it just kind of stops your process right there. Unless I can continue doing more with less, which at some point in time, that's going to make me less effective.
I'm just more worried about following a timeline that's efficient and effective for your goals.
Well, I think all of these ideas are good, because I don't think any of us want to repeat the budget process of last year.
So now with that, is there anything further on the next steps? Let me ask you a question. We have down here updates from elected officials. Do we actually want to do that, or we're just going to move on to the next part? I've always found that the last time we've done it, it's not really, we don't really update. How about this instead? Does anybody have anything that they would like to add for the good of the order and good of doing the business that we're doing?
I just want to announce, in case nobody had seen it posted yet, property taxes have been certified for collection. And so they can be paid starting anytime, which will help our revenue resources. The tax statements still will not be mailed out to, I believe, February 12th, so.
Lisa, maybe could you talk a little bit about the changes in the state levy and what that looks like?
That nightmare? Okay, so, sure, so, if you're not aware, when you get your tax statement and you have sticker shock.
And to be clear, it wasn't us.
That's right. Not all, it's not just your assessed value. It's not that your fire district did a levy lift or had a new EMS levy, or that when your school districts passed a bond issue in 2017, and this is the first year you're going to collect it, the state passed a House bill that increased the state school levy. There's part one, which is the regular rate that we're all used to, and then there's this additional rate in the beginning of 2018. So that increased tax levies by quite a bit. And I think if you have a $100,000 home, I think I said it was that $78,000 or $78. So, in Mason County, just general. So, but schools who have M&O levies did not have to decrease those levies in 2018. They will be decreased to a minimum of $1.50 or maximum of $1.50 beginning in 2019. So you're still paying that full M&O levy rate this year on top of the new state school levy, on top of any other levies that were passed. So the schools where you're paying for schools this year is pretty dramatic. And
It should bump down.
so, in 19, that should bump down. So, we have information out on our website. You can view, go online and check what your taxes were last year by district versus what they are this year by district. You can get your statements. So you can kind of get a view of how that's going to impact you. But you might have sticker shock.
Will the tax statement outline what the new state levy is? Will it be separated out?
Yes, so there'll be a
What do
part
we
one
call
and
it?
part two.
Part two.
Anybody else? Then let's move on to the next meetings. So we as a commission got together and thought it'd be better if we start to do this bi-monthly so we can get together, get in front of things quicker, listen to any issues you may have quicker, and find a way for us all to start working together and talking together. Are you guys comfortable with meeting every other month? Is there anybody that objects to that? Wonderful, okay. So right now, we have our next meetings scheduled for April 2nd at 2 p.m. I'd like you to consider, what would you like to see us doing as a committee, so you can bring back some of those things? How would you like us maybe to structure a strategic plan? The budget aspect, I would hope that you would consider for discussion at the next meeting, the idea of, A being status quo, A plus B and everything else that you want underneath it. When we did it the last time, we had capital, A and B, and then operating and the salaries and stuff, so that there was an opportunity to have both. So you're able to meet your mandated requirements of putting forward a budget that you need, while at the same time separating it out with at least for status quo, or perhaps what the guidelines of the commission are. Either one of those would work and give us something to work with. And that's just asking you to consider that. But most importantly, what would you like to see us do? What ideas do you have for us? And also, you can feel free to call me at any time if you don't like the way the meeting's being run, or you want something added into it, give me a yell. And I mean, literally, call me, yell at me, I'm fine. Let's just do it and find a way to make this work well. I appreciate everybody coming today. Anybody want to add anything?
Is that as far as the budget, is that we're going to concentrate on that next meeting?
I'm just giving my opinion. I'd like to see us look at that a
That's what I
lot.
mean, we
Yeah.
have staff representative.
I guess the question I would have with that, and I'm sitting here looking at the RCW now, it seems to be questionable on how everybody approached it last year, including myself, was I'm reading the RCW, and I want to know if we're going to follow the state RCW for, as we move into preliminary budgets, or if we're going to do something that's been recommended by the commission, because I said here last time I looked at this, and the RCW clearly says what we're supposed to file as a budget, not a pre-cut budget. It says you will file before the second Monday in August, detailed and itemized estimates of probable revenues from sources of taxation, what you believe you need. And I'm just, last time, when we file that preliminary budget, of course, is going to be greater than what we can expect to get, but the law does tell us, and that's what I argued last year, was you are to file with what you believe you need, not what somebody else believes you need. And that became a bone of contention last year, so I just want to know if we're going to follow the RCW, if we're going to do it different.
Well, nothing's going to be determined here today, or something like that, but I would hope that we find a way to do both. We want to follow the RCW, but at the same time, that doesn't preclude you from having another option that comes with it next, being able to bring forward other information or other ideas. By being able to do that, that's how we end up all being okay and get moving forward. But if you have to have that minimum in order to move forward, then we need as commission to talk about making sure you're given an opportunity to give that minimum first, or along with it. That's why that A+, as we had done several years ago, that would have given the opportunity to put everything in there you could dream, but it's still showing us as a commission where you are status quo-wise, what does it look like?
Well, I think what Casey's saying too is that this is what I need to run my office in an efficient and effective manner. Whether we have the funding for it or not, this is what I need, so that it's out there, it's established that what I'm working with officially, that sanctified later on, is less than what I really need. It's just an establishment of fact.
That's exactly
Yeah,
what
and
I
it
thought.
can be done very easily, just put that forward first, or put it together on the same one. But either way, there's ways of doing it. It doesn't have to be contentious unless we want to do it.
No, I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
contentious, it's just fact. This is what I need, I know and realize, and this is not a wish list of something extended further than that. It's just basically what I need to be effective and efficient. This is what I get. It's not way out here with new vehicles and new building and everything, so it's just kind of a,
But I don't see a harm in submitting that this is what I need to run efficiently, but I know I'm only getting this amount, and so this is
Exactly.
what I would do with that.
but I want that public
Right.
record. But I want that as a public record.
Sure,
This is what I
sure,
need.
Yeah, and we can do
I
that.
realize that this is what I get, but this is what I really need.
And I don't see where we have any problem. We can get that. We'll just put it forward so it can be done both ways. And the AA+, doesn't, we don't have to do that. If you have any other ideas, great. Let's bring them forward. Let's bring them forward now, though, so we're not, duking it out in the streets come September and November. It's better off if we have a good structure that we think will do both. I'm willing to hear anything you got. And so, as I said before, you feel free to call me on any of that or any of this other stuff. And if you don't like the way the meeting's been run, give me a yell, we'll fix that too. Anybody have anything further? Okay, excellent. Well, I thank you very much, and we'll come back together on April 2nd, 2 p.m. See you at 3 p.m.